7:02. I'm going to call to order the regular session of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. Chair Dale is not here today, so I will be chairing the meeting, at least for the initial part.
Roll call.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the roll call.
Commissioner Doss?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Present.
President Dale? Commissioner Marks?
Here.
And Commissioner Higgins? I heard him.
He's here.
Okay, will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so I guess we're going to start with the election of board president, vice president, and secretary. Is that the right order? Move on to right to that without commenting? Okay. Do I need to?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion for Stephen Coleman as president, Larry Doss as vice president, and Pat Higgins as secretary.
Is there a second?
I'd rather see Greg as second secretary, but I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion. And
I'm around more than Greg, so I'll accommodate.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this item?
I
Would
think
this
you're
one go
proving
into
you're
the?
just.
Okay, I'd like anyone from the public like to have comment on this item? Seeing none, move it back here for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Motion passes. So now I guess I get to keep this in front of me more permanently. Thank you. Okay, could we have a report on executive closed session?
Yeah, there were no reportable actions taken.
All right, thank you. And then next we'll move on to public comment. This portion of the agenda allows the public to speak to the board on various issues not itemized on this agenda. Is there any public comment tonight? Oh, being nice to me today. Okay, then we'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for items deemed routine. If anybody wants to have any discussion of anything on the consent calendar, we can ask for it to be moved off the consent calendar. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I guess there's no discussion on it since it's a consent calendar anyway, so.
Comment on it, though?
Sure.
Yeah, is Susan Penn here? No, I just wanted to note that we're caught up. We're up to date on our minutes.
That's nice to see. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, and we'll move on to communications and reports. Executive Director's report.
What am I going to? Oh.
Yeah, that one. So the first thing I wanted to report was the jetty repair, the work on the jetty repair. The last time I reported to you is that the Army Corps of Engineers was working on completing the environmental review and hoping to go out and start work on the jetties. The jetties are just in horrible shape. There are several breaches in the north and the south jetty. In last year's appropriation, there was approximately $8 million that they were appropriated to do the repairs. When they were doing their analysis, they determined that wasn't near enough money, not even close to do the North Jetty. And so when the colonel was up here and then the civilian commander earlier this year with the Harbor Safety Committee, took them on a tour of the bay and out to the jetty, and we walked the jetties. They told me today, when I discussed this with them, that they have now appropriated approximately $20 million for the repair work, and they're hoping to go out to bids in the next couple of months is what they're hoping to go out to bid. The way that they're hoping that the bids will work is there'll be enough money to do both the north and the south jetty, but they can't guarantee that. And they're going to go out to bid most likely with the north jetty as the priority project, and then the south jetty as the alternative. But that's really great news for the community because the jetties are just in really bad shape. And those are truly our first line of defense in a whole variety of things, including climate change issues. And so that was great news on them. While we're on the Army Corps of Engineers, I want to bring up that with the storms, the recent storms that we had, basically the bar pilots issued a draft restriction. And normally the entrance to the channel is at 48 feet. The draft restriction was issued to, I believe it was 32 feet. And next week, Green Diamond has a ship that's coming in, and they'll be going out with a half load. The Army Corps of Engineers came up and they did their annual surveys of the federal channel, and they did the entire channel from the entrance all the way along the Redwood Marine Terminal 1, and then all the way along the Eureka Shorefront, and all the way down to Hills Landing. The soundings or the surveys of the federal channel, they should be online within the next couple of weeks. I'm really happy to report that last year when we had the emergency shoaling conditions, we had a hard time getting any cooperation from the Army Corps of Engineers. We couldn't get access to survey data. We had submitted letters to them, and the colonel came up again and we had consultations with them. This year, the Army Corps came up here, and it was a completely different story. It was essentially open book. They spent a long time in here and went over and answered any questions that we had, zoomed in specific areas, and are giving us access to not only current data, but also historic data, so we can start to look at modeling and some other things. It really has changed, and our relationship is dramatically improving with the Army Corps of Engineers. Because they're a huge partner for us. We applied for a headwaters grant for the Redwood Marine Terminal 1, which would be to support the offshore wind energy. I got a letter from or an email today from Headwaters. They're going to have a board meeting on February 7th where they're hoping to spend the entire day in reviewing those proposals. And so hopefully we'll be invited to give a presentation. And if we're lucky, we will be awarded funds to do our work to try to replace the Redwood Marine Terminal 1 to support the offshore wind energy. We were in violation of the Coastal Commission found us to be in violation of our storage area. Basically, for years and years that they've been using the work area as a storage yard. So anyway, we met and consulted with the Coastal Commission, and we constructed a storage area at the end of the island, sent out letters to the tenants that are using the storage area, and we're going to be relocating our storage from the work yard to the end of the island. Most likely what you're going to see is the work area will, a lot of the stuff will be moved out of that area, and then the space will be available for people to work in those portions. We were also alleged to be in violation of cutting within the natural area. We were looking to remove homeless. There's a significant homeless problem on Woodley Island Marina. The tenants have reported to this board a number of times about transients and other people living in the natural area, and also we need to do fence repairs and other items which we believe are included in the management plan that we're authorized to do. And I believe Commissioner Higgins is on the committee, 5-member committee that's supposed to oversee the wildlife area. And so that's my report. And then Chris.
Okay. So from the facilities world, first I'd like to acknowledge my predecessor and one of my mentors, Alan Bob Locke, who retired from this role. See you tonight, sir.
Well, not anymore.
Nice to see you here. In any event, we locked dock access at RMT1. I believe I reported at our last meeting in December that we had a problem with a lot of folks that were not authorized to be on the dock participating in various activities there, as well as leaving their accessories with them. So we've locked that dock and it limited to forklift traffic only. It's made a remarkable difference. We've had incredible cooperation from those tenants that use it. And it's just one more step in cleaning up an area that has been quite challenging for us. So that's gone away. We also recovered a sunken vessel. We had some help from one of the local marine services groups that we hired. We're grateful for their staff and team that helped us to resurrect this boat that went to the bottom of Humboldt Bay. This boat tied up to RMT1 without our knowledge, and it was believed to be abandoned. So as it sits right now, we're working with the boat owner to not only have possession of his vessel, but to compensate us accordingly so we can pay our bills related to the removal of that boat. Here on the island, we took a lot of feedback from tenants in recent months about some of the deferred maintenance at the island and just overall a lack of attention. I don't think it was lack of attention. There's a lot to do here. It's a very large piece of property with an extensive amount of activity. But we're continuing with some facility team improvement plans we came up with, along with implementing the tenant feedback. That's a shot of, I think that's A dock. We're in the process. We've got breakwater, C dock, and A dock well under our way to being completed with power washing and doing some basic repairs, cleats and whatnot, do rub board replacements. We've assigned a designated team member from our staff to be a groundskeeper here at Woodley Island Marina. If you have a chance to walk around, you'll see the Embarcadero is looking great. He's really working on the landscape. He's about 2/3 of the way through. We've started mowing on a recurring basis and other things. And again, this was driven by your feedback, folks, so thank you. Finally, a few meetings ago, there was a discussion about pump outs and how we would handle that, and it was a kind of a suggestion that we have a designated pump out station. So for those of you that use it, D23 is now your designated pump out station. If you give us a call when you're en route, we'll have a staff member there ready to take care of you. Slide, please, boss. Oh, sorry. Well, we missed it. Oh, there we go. So that's the drill rig, kind of exciting. The Nordic folks have started their geotechnical review for their report, their soils report. And so there's the boys from Tabor Drilling taking those samples. We're studying some on-site utilities and common areas to assess opportunities for better property management and hopefully recovery of those costs. It's very costly to light all the different areas and maintain various pieces that are maybe outside the lease premises that are part of the function there at the park. And finally, there's quite a bit left, as everyone knows, at RMT2 from the prior operators. So we're taking one last look at the recycle value of those, this electrical switches, the electrical gear, and some other remaining materials. Other than that, it just keeps raining, boys, so we don't, and boys and girls, so we don't get out much. But thank you very much. And congratulations on your new appointments.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple items. I don't have a PowerPoint, but we, after a delay, we did reconvene the advisory committee for the sediment management program environmental impact report. Commissioner Doss was able to attend. We got really good input from our partners from the city of Arcata and the county, as well as from the stakeholders involved in that. Helped us refine the project description and gave really good input about how to make the document really meaningful and help streamline and add some predictability as we move forward with dredging projects and beneficial use projects. Also, as I reported to the board in the past, we pursued 2 FEMA grants. One for getting reimbursed for the part of the dredging we did this year that could be attributed to the storm event, the emergency. And then a second grant that we pursued to get reimbursed for our time as well as Sterling Green Industries' time in recovering the chain that had to be recovered for dredging to occur at Rock and Roll Alley or whatever. And we did receive the chain funding. We still haven't heard about the dredge funding, but we should hear soon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Good, congratulations on the one grant. Hopefully,
Yeah.
keep our fingers crossed
Yeah.
for the other. District Council? All right, so I guess Commissioner reports. Commissioner Duss?
Yeah, so lots of meetings, and the 2020 has kicked off pretty busy. As Adam just mentioned, a sediment management committee meeting. There was a dredge surcharge meeting, and I think we had one that was canceled because of the last power outage. And several bay users, met with several bay users across from North and Mid-Bay, or South and Mid-Bay. Had a couple meetings with Nordic since we last met, and that was very informative and exciting to see that they're moving ahead positively. And I also want to thank Larry Otker. He put together a great dinner for the whole staff and the commissioners, and we all got to socialize together, and which is, I think, really important as far as our team. We're not a large group, but boy, we get a lot of things done, and it's really nice to meet everybody and reacquaint. So really well done there, Larry. And then lastly, I'd like to just say a happy birthday to Sandy Dale. That's why Greg is not here tonight. So, and I feel like he's excused for that.
Commissioner Martin?
And he got unelected, so
Yeah.
he should have showed.
Yeah.
A coup took place.
It was all part of the diabolical plan there.
Yeah.
I also attended the Harbor District dinner, and it was a good time, good food, good company, and nobody got thrown out of there. And as far as Harbor District, I have been serving on the North Coast Rail Authority too, and the Rail Authority is at the point where they actually had some work that needed to go out for bid in Ukiah, and in the bid document there was an agreement that whoever fixed up the property in Ukiah at the depot property, that if they do the repairs and everything there, they are not guaranteed that they'll be paid. And those went out for bid, and I'm like, who's going to bid on a job where you've been told you're probably not going to be paid? So if you're wondering what dire straits the North Coast Rail Authority's in, it's in pretty bad shape financially right now. And so we'll know more next month about what's going on. As far as locally, I'm just glad that everything's running along.
And how are things with you, Commissioner Higgins?
All righty, thank you, Stephen. Well, first of all, I want to apologize for missing the employees' dinner. I had annual Eel River Recovery Project meeting in Covelo where I fed 50 people on Sunday, and my Friday was consumed, as was I. So I was there in spirit, and thank you for my fellow board members covering it, because staff is everything. So I meant no disrespect. I just got run over by a truck. In the realm of the Eel River, it looks like we're at about 10 to 15,000 fall Chinook again this year. Not strong, and 2 years in a row, and it seems like ocean productivity is starting to undermine the ability of fall Chinook stocks in the eel to rebound, but there's some hope that the ocean may normalize coming into next year. Pike minnow. Pike minnow should have never got introduced into the eel. They eat the native fish. We should remove them. Fish and Game has been reluctant to give me a permit. We've reapplied. We will not relent. We will take down pike minnow. Like it or not, we're in charge of evolution. When you put something into a river, you can't just back away and say, oh, well, whatever. We should basically control that species, and it's possible, so stay tuned. On February the 6th, the North Coast Regional Board will award yours truly with a Stewardship Award for Northern California, and I'm very pleased to be in receipt of that award from the North Coast Regional Board, which keeps our drinking water safe and our rivers healthy for fish. And talking with Matt St. John, the executive director, when he called me to let me know that I'd been awarded, I pinned him down immediately and said, we need an exemption on the Samoa Peninsula from municipal water quality standards because no one's drinking it, and we need to put our sediment there, and we can't get to a sustainable sediment management plan without your acquiescence. And so a letter will go forward to Matt St. John of the North Coast Regional Board. This subject will be calendared, I believe, in April when the North Coast Regional Board visits here. And then the North Coast Regional Board will be an important ally for us to be able to deposit sediment on the Samoa Peninsula, which is least distance for us to transport it, so therefore cost-effective, least energy going forward in climate change, no longer wasting sediment at the hoods, dumping it in the ocean. It's a stupid thing to do. And so I believe that we won't have to wait till 2021 to have the basic plan changed to accommodate our ability to store sediment on the Samoa Peninsula and go from an era when we treated sediment coming out of the bay as some kind of like nasty thing. And in fact, it's how we'll fight climate change, and it's how we'll restore the Humboldt Bay ecosystem. We need to be unconstrained in this regard, and so I'm optimistic that the North Coast Regional Board will move in our favor, and that's going forward. And then the Wildlife Committee was invoked. The Woodley Island Wildlife Committee was convened in 1982. It has not met since 2015. It tends only to meet in crisis, and so it really needs to be revitalized because members from Humboldt State University, the guy from Fish and Game is retired, Bob Merrill's still there from the Coastal Conservancy, but we need a new person also from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm working on that. I've made the contacts to people that would potentially serve in this regard. And I'm also really, really interested in cultivating Audubon because, folks, before we built Woodley Island up 10 feet, that was all like swamp. And so like the way it was in 1982 is not like the way it was, before the white man. And so this is a piece of land that is now degraded by invasive species and way below its carrying capacity and potential for wildlife. And we should shoot higher than just kind of mowing the weeds, and we can't even get a permit to mow the weeds. That's under dispute. So I mean, it's like the wildlife area here should be, it's almost unique in terms of its potential to create riparian where nesting birds could use. It's also something that could be really, really much more an amenity for the public than its current condition, which is blighted and overrun by invasive species. And so expect to hear more on this.
Thank you for your enthusiasm, Commissioner Higgins.
Oh yeah, we're going to do this finally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, though. It needs to have a different management scheme for that. I don't have much to report myself. I echo my fellow commissioners in the appreciation of the appreciation dinner and the appreciation of staff who always go above and beyond to do the many things that are asked of them here. So thank you very much for that. I want to report on an event coming up in the future that I'm very excited about. March 21st is the Perilous Plunge, which supports the Redwood Discovery Museum. Last year, I participated in it as a Harbor District team of one. This year, I am once again registered as a Harbor District team as one, but there's plenty of time for staff or commissioners or anyone else interested.
I'm ready to slap on my wetsuit, Stephen. I've never done this.
It's
You
a
just
lot of
moved
fun.
me. You reached me right here. I want to join you in jumping into the bay.
It's, just go to the...
Larry, you raised money to get somebody to pay for that.
And then if you aren't interested in jumping in the bay, you can always go onto the Redwood Discovery Museum webpage and click support a funder and navigate around and you'll find us. And basically, if we don't get enough money, you won't get to see harbor commissioners jumping in the bay. So, I know everybody wants to see that many times. So think of it as going to a good cause. And the Redwood Discovery Museum as well. So with that, I will move on to unfinished business, of which I see there is none. And so to new business, the Humboldt Bay Management Plan Billboard Policy Amendment. Is there a presentation on this?
Yeah, there's a brief presentation on this. Having little issues with our projector, so bear with us, please. So you have a staff report, and I'll just kind of briefly summarize what's in the staff report and what we're asking. What staff is asking for is to work on amending the Humboldt Bay Management Plan to provide more clear policy regarding permitting of billboards. So that staff has a better idea of how to react, how to process any permit for maintenance of billboards, constructions of new boards, erecting billboards that fall down. We do have regulatory jurisdiction over billboards, and we regularly permit construction and maintenance of similar structures such as docks, mariculture equipment. Seemingly, we would also permit construction and maintenance of billboards, but we never have. So that's what we're looking for direction on. As noted in the staff report and other items you've received, there's question about whether billboards are compatible with the public trust or not. So that's part of this discussion. So we looked at existing policy to see what kind of guidance there was. The Humboldt Bay Management Plan does not have any clear direction. It recognizes that billboards are a topic that the district should be considering, and it basically states that in the future, for example now, that the district should be looking at forming a more specific policy around billboard management, but doesn't provide any specific guidance. We dug through all our ordinances, and there's one ordinance that seems relevant, which is Ordinance 7, which states that signs and related structures, other than those that are necessary and approved by the district for navigation, public safety, resource management, and identification purposes, should be eliminated and prohibited from the title of submerged lands within the jurisdiction of the district. And this is just the last slide. We want to give a little more guidance rather than having this be too nebulous to the board. You know, when Larry and I were talking about this, we identified sort of 4 different types of billboard permits that we might receive. Permit applications to construct new billboards, applications to potentially expand a billboard, including the footprint, applications to re-erect billboards that collapse during storms and stuff, which we see regularly these days, and then applications just for more routine maintenance of billboards. And so what we're looking for is, you know, guidance on high-level policy guidance on for each of those activities. Are those topics that we should even consider permitting? Are they, you know, consistent with our mandate and, you know, the public trust doctrine, or not? Or is it more nuanced in different circumstances? So we want to start that discussion and start getting guidance on it from the board. We realize we might not finish that tonight, but we wanted to, you know, bring it out and at least start the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add something, Larry?
Can I just add something to that? Is basically ordinance number 7. Can you go back to ordinance number 7
Sure.
for a second? Ordinance number 7, this ordinance number 7 was drafted in 1975. That's when the ordinance was drafted. And the topic of this is really is sort of the master plan. And then, you know, essentially that's been the direction since 1975. Really before Woodley Island was built or any of that, when they were still looking at forming, you know, really the district. And so the district hasn't been actively doing anything with billboards, you know, since 1975. And then if you sort of fast forward to 2000, I believe it was 6, when the Humboldt Bay Management Plan, which is really a much more comprehensive document, almost think of it like a general plan type document, not exactly, but kind of in that framework. It totally punts on billboards. There's a policy in there that basically says we don't have a policy on billboards. That is the policy. And the Humboldt Bay Management Plan, it says it was consistent with this framework. And the Humboldt Bay Management Plan says at some point in the future, we should get together and come up with the policies and analyze the legal and the regulatory and the public input and all of these things, and really come up with how do we want to handle billboards. And so there's been a whole lot of discussion, and so really now is the time, staff believes, to have this discussion of what should we do about billboards in the future here. And could you go back to that one little table that you have? And so, you know, in the end, we think that we can craft some language pretty quickly and bring it back if we have some direction. And, you know, just, it seems to be that pretty clear that there shouldn't be any construction of any new billboards. I mean, it seems like that has historically been the policy, and then the policy, I mean, and so if the answer is yes, then we can put a yes there, or if the answer is no, if it's yes, then we can move on and quickly draft clear policy to that effect. Then the same thing deals with, you know, can they expand an existing one? It's kind of a yes or no question. And if the answer is no, then we can really make crystal clear language that there be no confusion. And then what consistently kind of happens every couple of years is that, you know, we get a big storm and the wind blows down, is can you rebuild it? And a lot of times what happens is that if you have structures that have been there and predate your code, then it's pretty common on land that a bank will ask for a burn down letter from a jurisdiction, and they'll say, if my structure burnt down, then would you allow that structure to be rebuilt? And every jurisdiction has different rules on that. And this is kind of similar to that. If the wind blows and it knocks down your structure, then would the jurisdiction allow it to be rebuilt? And is the answer yes or no? And that's kind of a question that we would like an answer from. And really, if we could get as simple as yes or no, then we could come back with policy or language to that effect. And then the next one is the question of the ones that are standing right now, routine maintenance. You know, replacing the boards on the back, behind the sign. You know, some of these routine maintenance things. Can they do routine maintenance? Right now, the Humboldt Bay Management Plan says that in any structure in the bay, you can do routine maintenance on, you know, structures. It doesn't distinguish between signs or other things. That's generally the policy within there. And so if we had some general direction, can you maintain it? Then we could draft some language, bring it back to the committee, you know, again, yes or no, whatever the board tells us to do. You know, in our mind, if they were framed on these 4 primary topics, then we could craft something pretty rapidly and bring it right back to the commission for your consideration, if that's the direction that you wanted us to go.
Thank you. I'd like to just start with a couple quick clarifying questions, and then I'll go. To your knowledge, has the district ever permitted the construction or the repair or the maintenance of a billboard?
No.
And I know this is probably a harder question to answer, but what do other regulatory agencies have to say about the construction and the presence of billboards in tidelands?
This variable, there's a recent billboard that fell down within Tidelands, and my understanding, I don't know that anything's final, but is that the county's not exerting jurisdiction over it because essentially, because it's within the Tidelands and within the Harbor District's jurisdiction. The Coastal Commission has received an application for reconstructing it, and they're still considering that application. They haven't made a determination yet.
Okay.
And then there's Caltrans.
And then there's Caltrans, which, I mean, there's the Outdoor Advertising Act, which I think you're all as familiar with as me, which I'm not that familiar with it, but
That's the whole
It's
thing.
another, yeah.
It's like they run billboards for Caltrans, and it's almost like they're separate from District 1. So it's been kind of...
Would you like to comment, Pat?
Yeah. No. No, and then we can discuss the fourth one. And my basis for that is that these are in public trust lands, it's not compatible, it goes back to our 75 regs. The billboards were originally much smaller, so they're no longer in conformance with their original permits, and it's time. And Caltrans spent a huge amount of money getting about 17 or 18 removed. These are like the 3 that are left. It's time. We set this course in 1975, and here we are 45 years later, and I think there's a strong support for this from the public. There is a willingness to kind of mix it up in terms of like advocacy if this outcome is not achieved, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of that equation. I don't want to be fighting people to put back up billboards and getting sued for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Marks?
Yeah, has the Harbor District ever had a lease contract with any of these billboard companies, and have they ever received funds from them, even if they had returned the money or collected the money in the past?
To my knowledge, never.
Never. Okay, it was brought up years past that it was the case.
But it's possible, again, to my knowledge.
And so if that is if that is the case, I think we need to find out. And from what I understood in my early years on the Harbor Commission, is that there was checks being sent by I forget.
CBS Outdoors?
Yeah, and we were returning them at that time.
I think it's important to understand there's the distinction between the regulatory authority of the Harbor District, which we have regulatory authority over everything, below the high tide line. And then there's the second issue is, well, what land do we own or do we lease to other people that we may derive revenue from? There are private parcels that are within the bay that the state didn't grant to the Harbor District, and those are still under private ownership. And so, to my knowledge, there are no billboards on any Harbor District granted lands from the state.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dust?
I have a question also for clarifying. When was the last time we were involved with permitting of a private dock?
The last ones were probably, small ones, were the boat ramps. We're about ready to, shortly we'll receive one for the one in Hills Landing. Probably Arcata did some at the Marsh, the ones over here. Some of the.
How about
in the
private?
last 5 years or so, there's been Chevron Dock, Sierra Pacific.
Those are commercial.
Those are big docks.
Big docks that been existing.
There is, and I think we all have different times that but there was probably around 2010, one of the smaller docks on Indian Island had permitting for repairs.
For repairs,
Yeah.
but nothing brand new.
I can't think of any brand new docks
I'm not
going
thinking of-
in the last 10 years anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's underused docks, so probably not much new ones going in. Oh, there's been a reconstruction of one, almost like a new dock, King Salmon. Also probably around 2010. Isn't after the fact.
As I recall, if you want to build a dock, you've got to go through pretty much act of Congress and.
Well,
to get
there'll be
anything done.
mitigation requirements, yeah.
Which you're gonna get shot down. So, I would think it would be the same if someone was to try to build a billboard. I think if we likened it to the same requirements, it's not saying no, but it's not gonna happen either.
I don't know. I mean, there is a process for us to permit.
I would think a dock would be friendlier to build than a billboard, and it's my understanding that you're not going to build a new dock by the time you deal with eelgrass mitigation. There, a private individual could not afford realistically to build a new dock for their dinghy, let alone a sail.
And they are completely different types of construction too.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
there's many other places to put a billboard, but
Mhm.
you
Right.
can't really, putting the dock up in Newland wouldn't make a lot of sense. Richard?
Well, I guess I might as well be the first one to throw it out there. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we start with no all the way down.
I'll second for the point of discussion. And I think that the routine maintenance, what's come to my attention is that this billboard is much larger, the one that fell down, is much larger than its original footprint. And so I think if you're going to maintain something, it seems to have increased in size incrementally over the years. And so that's certainly not its original permitted footprint. And so if we're going to do anything with regard to maintenance, I think it would be to maintain in the original footprint of the sign. But it's cleaner if we just say no, 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 and no. So, and that's already on the table. So.
And we do still need to go to the public, of course. And I just say for the sake of argument, and not necessarily that this is the way I'm leaning, but the difference between routine maintenance of something, like if we were to talk about routine maintenance, that would have to be defined very clearly, at the very least, of anything happening above the high tide, or mean high tide mark. If no, you want to say something?
I just, regarding routine maintenance, and I think we're only talking about, what, 2 remaining billboards on the North Bay. We also have at least 1 billboard South Bay, which is approaching King Salmon, that is within tide land. It might be on private property still, but I would not support saying no, especially for routine maintenance, because I think you have to allow something that is existing to be maintained for one, a reason of just being able to maintain its existence, but 2 is there's a liability of damage if in this case, if a billboard falls or someone's hurt because we're not allowing maintenance to a structure.
And I would add, in the non-conforming use context, and I don't know whether these existing billboards would be considered that or not, but in the non-conforming use context, routine maintenance is allowed. Right? If you have a structure that's non-conforming, you're allowed to maintain it, but if it collapses or if you expand it by a certain percentage, then you lose the legal non-conforming use status, and then it can be considered a nuisance and removed. But if there is a structure out there that is a non-conforming use, meaning it predated our regulation of it, then routine maintenance would otherwise be allowed.
I also want to bring up one other thing too, because it says the proposed action in district jurisdiction, which is, I mean, we have plenty of jurisdiction that's not in the tideland
So
and property.
our jurisdiction is defined, they're in the
Or is that different
enabling
than
legislation.
necessarily
It is-
property?
It is within our regulatory jurisdiction, which is basically all tidal waters, but with some nuance.
Okay. So I
It's a
just,
little
I
different
just-
around Indian Island.
So it's not necessarily the same as district property.
It's
district jurisdiction.
nothing to do with district property. It's our regulatory jurisdiction, which is all of Humboldt Bay tidelands. Again, with some small nuance.
All right, does anyone else?
I guess one other point to think about is, I think it doesn't say it here, but we're focusing in on Humboldt Bay, and the Harbor District has jurisdiction.
Not regulatory jurisdiction. Our regulatory jurisdiction is only in Humboldt Bay.
So,
Sorry.
we don't have any jurisdiction, say, over Shelter Cove.
Correct.
And not along any of the the openings of the rivers or?
That's correct.
Okay.
We can do projects there,
Uh-huh.
such as we do in Shelter Cove, but we don't have regulatory jurisdiction.
Okay.
Permits aren't required from us.
Okay.
That's only in Humboldt Bay.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if it's all right with the commission, I'd like to bring it to the public, so if any public has any comments on this issue, please come up to the podium and identify yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
My name is Jeff Wills, down on Point Falcon. I own the property out there where the billboard is falling down. I mean, a couple things I want to say right away is I'm a little concerned about your comments, Commissioner Higgins. I've submitted with my application the original 1961 Caltrans permit showing that that billboard is a 12 by 40, which is the existing size. So when I hear you say that it's been expanded over time, it's not as big as it used, or it's larger than it used to be, that's absolutely
That may be
incorrect.
incorrect, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, he has the application from 1961 showing it's 1240. You're saying that's public trust, and it's not. I actually own that property there. In regards to these two, or these four, it'd be hard pressed to build a new billboard out there. You cannot expand the footprint of a billboard anyway, so they're pretty much moot talking points. Those would be absolute no's. But as far as re-erect a billboard or routine maintenance, I just don't understand how any government agency could prevent a private property owner to either maintain or rebuild his existing private business without, if you're, basically, you could not prevent us from rebuilding that without just compensation of that. You can't take something and instead of, if you want something to go away, just instead of eminent domain with it, just not permanent, not allow it to be rebuilt. That doesn't seem like a fair process, and I don't think government should be allowed to do that. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this issue?
Hi, I'm Michelle McKeegan. I'm part of Keep Eureka Beautiful, and we are in favor of all no's. And let me just say, routine maintenance of existing billboard structures, just sort of, I think we should let them die a natural death and not routinely maintain them. Billboards are one of the things that Americans can all agree on. Americans really do not like billboards. 90% plus always say they dislike billboards. So I think in terms of public trust, no's are what we would like to see.
Thank you.
Hello, Dave Nazar, representing Humboldt Bay Billboard Bye Bye, which was a group formed about 5 years ago. We got, I think, over 2,500 signatures to remove the billboards around the bay. That came to pass for the most part within the jurisdiction of the city of Arcata, within the jurisdiction of the city of Eureka. The billboards that were there came down. And then going forward from that, the Coastal Commission ruled that part of the Indianola project would involve removing the 4 billboards, now down to 3 that are out there. I understand there's some negotiations going on with that, but that was an original requirement of the Coastal Commission for the Indianola overpass. And with regard to your mandate, I think it's pretty clear in a lot of ways. The 2007 Humboldt Bay Management Plan says the scenic and visual qualities of coastal areas shall be considered and protected as a resource of public importance. Permitted development shall be sited and designed to protect views to and along the ocean and scenic coastal areas, to minimize the alteration of natural landforms, to be visually compatible with the character of surrounding areas, and where feasible, to restore and enhance visual quality in visually degraded areas. Now, I think it's pretty clear that if you're a tourist coming around here, enjoying your view of the bay, and suddenly there's a big old sign telling you where to buy tires, that interferes with your enjoyment of the bay. It interferes with the visual qualities of coastal areas. The same management plans as views of the bay are important from adjoining cities and coastal communities. Views of the shorelines as seen from the water and lands are also important aspects of the visual environment. That's from the founding Harbor District document. In approving proposals before the district shall require the existing views of Humboldt Bay be protected, and that enhanced views of the bay and its shorelines be provided whenever possible or feasible to do so. So there's a very clear mandate that the views of the bay are part of your jurisdiction. And it's very clear to me, and I think to a whole lot of other people, that billboards interfere with that. Humboldt Bay is a treasure in many ways for many different people. While much of the Harbor District's work is directed towards activities that take place on the bay itself, the most widespread enjoyment of its beauty are the visual resources from the highways, from people who are passing through. Billboards aggressively mar this resource and detract from the natural beauty of the bay. So I would ask you, please act to revise the management plan to ban all billboards from the bay shore areas, forbidding erection of new billboards and repairing existing ones, and providing for the prompt removal of any existing billboards that interfere with the visual resources in Humboldt Bay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jennifer Cobb with Humboldt Baykeeper. I'm here on behalf of Humboldt Baykeeper's members to encourage you to amend the Humboldt Bay Management Plan to prohibit all new and existing billboards within your jurisdiction. It's clear that off-site commercial billboards, which means it's not part of the business on the property itself, therefore off-site is the term the ODA uses, are not consistent with the public trust doctrine, which the district is obligated to protect. And even where property owners argue for a vested right or a grandfathered right, there can be no legally vested right to impair the public trust resources. And we sent you a letter with some case law from Audubon Society, San Francisco Baykeeper, and whatnot, that explicitly states that. The non-conforming use idea, the legal non-conforming use, is an idea that's in county code and city code and zoning regulations, which don't apply on this property. The county has clearly stated they don't have jurisdiction on this property because the jurisdiction was given to the district in 1971 or whatever year that was. It's also pretty clear that billboards are not consistent with Ordinance 7, which only allows navigational and public safety signs. And so we strongly encourage you to direct staff to develop a policy clearly stating that all billboards shall be eliminated and prohibited from tidal and submerged lands within your jurisdiction in accordance with Ordinance 7. And to Commissioner Doss's point about the liability issue, I understand the concern there, but the ODA permitting process actually requires that the billboards be able to withstand 100 pounds of wind load per square foot. And it's pretty clearly not being enforced, and so that's a liability as it stands. And lastly, the permits on these billboards are expired. The ODA permits are expired. So we strongly encourage you to adopt, direct staff to adopt a policy prohibiting all construction of new billboards, expanding the footprint, routine maintenance of existing billboard structures, and re-erecting billboards that have collapsed. Thank you. We're expired on December 31st.
No, you're not.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Scott Frazier from Blue Lake. I like the simplicity of the motion. For all the reasons that Jen and Dave just spoke, I'd like to support that you have 4 no's in your policy. It shouldn't take a lot of staff time to write up a policy that embraces that concept in that direction.
Okay, anybody else from the public like to speak on this matter? All right, then I'll bring it back up to the board. We still have a motion. Is there any further discussion?
I want to get this right. You know, so 4 no's is very simple, but not very nuanced. And so I could go either way. Table to refine the 4th concern, or move forward with 4 no's.
It was Commissioner Marx's original motion, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you had the second, so
I had the second, so he...
are you considering revising your second, or are you leaving your second?
I want to listen to my other fellow commissioners and see what their concerns are, and see whether or not, if everybody's ready to go on 4 no's, and we don't have any significant concerns in terms of any downside.
Would staff feel comfortable with the direction of 4 no's up there and know how to craft that proposal to bring back to the commission? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any additions or by my fellow commissioners or deletions? I'm hearing some deletions in a him-haw.
So I'd like to just bring a couple other points up, and I don't like it when government says no, and government says no a lot by adding conditions on projects, which is I don't know, that's just the world we live in. I would rather see, if we do anything, is just make the rules for building a billboard the same as if we have an application to build anything on the bay, and make it similar to the process if someone wants to build a dock, which is extremely difficult, if not impossible to do. And then by saying no, or letting these things fall into the bay, there's no path of removal. We're damaging private owners. When the Harbor District document was created, if the founding organizations and folks at that time wanted the billboards removed, I think they would have specifically said, remove the billboards. But at that time, I believe there were dozens, if not multiple dozens of billboards around the highway and the bay at the time. And then the billboards, over time, have become part of the wildlife's use. Many times I've seen birds resting on them, and I'm sure there's some little microorganism hanging out in the shade below them. So just like we have to mitigate for pulling out piers out of the bay, I think then if we say no, then we need to compensate and take on the financial responsibility of mitigation for removal. We've found in the southern part of the bay that it can be thousands of dollars. And yeah, I think those are just the points I'm going to stand on.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead, Richard.
your argument is that there's too much government control and too much policy and too much politics involved. So you want to add a layer of bureaucracy by adding rules to, like, putting up a dock. You're trying to as Scott eloquently said, it was a nice, simple 4-0 no. And when you're adding layers to it without actually saying what you actually want included, I mean, not some vague thing. We were talking a physical structure. Is there anything that you think that there has to be, you know, in this to mitigate the issue?
Yeah, I think we need to, if we're going to look at 4 components, I think we need to allow for a billboard that falls or is damaged or is vandalized to be re-erected or corrected. And I believe that we need to allow for routine maintenance. If someone wants to go for trying to build one, more power to them. I'm not in favor of that, but that's there. We don't say no, you can't build a dock on Humboldt Bay, but if you want to build a dock for your sailboat, good luck. Bring a few people's checkbooks with you.
So I'm going to speak now, and I would bring up the point again that a dock is a very different structure on a bay than a billboard, and that a dock is for a purpose that's dependent upon the bay. It's for a boat on the bay, and so that's a much different type of structure and consideration than something that has no dependence on the bay. I think there's been a steady trend from pretty much all directions to work towards the removal of billboards around Humboldt Bay on various sections of roads, as parts of various projects, and that's been a struggle each time. But I think the district needs to be clear, and if anyone here thinks that they would even consider issuing a permit for a new billboard, an existing billboard, re-erecting a billboard, or maintenance of a billboard, then we can put that in the plan. But if we're thinking of just kind of punching it down the road, we don't want to say it, but we would never sign a permit, and I don't think that's in the service of anybody. So I think we should amend the Humboldt Bay management plan to go with the direction that the community is going, the direction that our ordinances dictate, the direction that's in compliance with the management plan and the vision for the bay. So I would support a straight no vote. And
I'm switched on for 4 no's. I think it's specious to say that you could build a billboard when it's against our public trust charge. Public trust prevails regardless of private property rights. And so we're in a box. We really can't allow these things to go forward, and it's inconsistent for us to allow them to be rebuilt. And we would be exposed to potential legal challenges if we took a position different than that. And so therefore, I am now in full support of the motion on the floor.
Further discussion, then how are we going to handle King Salmon? The businesses down there want to repair their signs. We're going to tell them no.
What's it sitting in, Larry? Is it in Bay Mud?
It's sitting in the wet side of the, yeah.
And just when Caltrans was
Now, are we sure we have jurisdiction
Yeah, when
over this
Cal-
one that you're talking about?
When Caltrans was here talking about the 101 corridor project, we gave them a hard time for continuing to permit maintenance on these billboards. I remember hearing that. So, are we considering doing the same thing? should we have a motion and a second on the floor?
I think
No
it's a
other
moment of
discussion.
truth, man.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
We did, oh, so we have 3 in favor, 1 opposed. Now, this,
It passed.
it was a motion, I'm just thinking, like, did this have to
No,
be a
you got it,
motion? Because we're
Stephen.
not adopting any changes, we're just
No, you're
directing
just
staff.
asking- You're providing staff direction.
Yep.
You're not
So-
taking any final action here.
Nope.
You're
Yeah.
going to.
So we probably shouldn't have done a motion to begin
You
with.
could. No, I think it's great.
That's-
that
puts our cards on the
you
table.
Yeah.
draft- We'll take the direction that you provided us, we'll put together some draft language. We're gonna have to basically have legal review of the document to make sure that we're preparing something that we feel comfortable that will withstand legal scrutiny. And then ultimately bring it back to the board. Nothing will be approved until you make action to approve an ordinance, amending Humboldt Bay management plan. Just one point of clarification is, generally there, and again, I don't know for sure because we haven't done a detailed study. We've all been around the bay long enough. I've seen there's billboards, and billboards, generally speaking, are basically it's a sign for hire. Whoever wants to, put their copy on the sign, they don't even have to be, they could be any place, but they would advertise your place. Then there's the second group of sign is basically an off-premise sign, which is a specific billboard. Person may own a piece of property, and they basically are renting, it's their property, and they're renting or advertising for a business on a different piece of property other than what they do. And so that's just one, and it's a permanent sign, and it's always the same. And then the third is, and there's some along the bay, I've seen them, you really take a look, there's sitting in the water, and they're actually on-premise signs. And so they're signs that are for the business that's located on that property. And a portion of them may be in tidelands. And so then, what I heard specifically you say was billboards. Then that's different than just every sign. And so if you want it to be every sign, then we could draft it that way. But at this point, what I'm hearing you say, unless you say otherwise, this is strictly related to billboards.
That's what it says.
And yeah,
That was
that brings up a whole
fine.
nother area of discussion, and so I think right now we're dealing with billboards. If we want to deal with other signs, I think we have to bring that up as another agenda.
We should probably, if we're gonna have anything that's comprehensible to vote on, we should probably define what a billboard is then.
And, when you bring this back to us, it would be great to get whatever legal opinion, and, we'll have time to discuss that once again, but I think the direction was clear.
Yep.
All right, moving on. To item number B, item letter B, update on the formation of the volunteer boat captain program.
Want me to update? Sure. Well, we've had one meeting with the potential volunteers who would be either boat captains or boat deckhands on the fireboat, potentially on other boats as well. And then we've also been coordinating with Humboldt Bay Fire to develop procedures for coordinated training, but also procedures for responding to emergencies. It's going well. A couple of the things that we're addressing even tonight are the insurance. That'll be sort of wrapped up if you approve a resolution that's in front of you tonight. And then the workman's comp, Mindy, thankfully, she's done a lot of work on this, and she's figured out that workman's comp can apply to the volunteers. They just have to provide sort of standard personal information that they would provide if they're an employee. So that should all be resolved next week, and then people will sort of be ready to go. We've established rules for how much training deckhands and boat captains need, and a whole process for that. And we're starting to set up, trainings for them as well as coordinated training for Humboldt Bay Fire. In response to a fire, if you're interested, typically who would respond would be the volunteer captain and deckhand, and then Humboldt Bay Fire would be providing 3 people for each response: an engineer, a fire captain, and a firefighter.
So are these first responders that are coming forward to volunteer, or what's our pool in terms of like who's coming
the
forward?
captains, so I think a good way to look at it is that, the volunteer program, they're boat operators. And then in the case of an emergency, they're coordinating with first responders, firefighting experts, if you will. So the boat captains that are being trained on the boat, they all have 50-ton captain's licenses, and then they're meeting minimum training standards on the specific boat. Right, so they already have all that background. And then, of course, the firefighters are Humboldt Bay firefighters, so they're well-versed in actual fire.
And of course, they have their own workman's comp.
Yeah, they're all
Yeah.
covered under
Yeah.
their own,
Yeah.
that's correct, yeah, right.
And so this isn't necessarily, I mean, I realize the driving force is the emergencies, but volunteer boat captains could also be used in, planned non-emergency situations
Oh, absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, people trained on our boats, and particularly when we're taking, either for hire, then we need an actual licensed captain, or if it's over a certain number of passengers, we need a volunteer circumstance, we want to do a licensed captain. Absolutely, yeah.
And is there, like in circumstances like that, is there, like by volunteer, does that mean that they're never compensated, or that there's
They're not
potential for-
compensated.
Yeah.
That's correct, they're volunteering, yeah. Maybe we can get t-shirts.
There might be some expense reimbursement that may
Okay.
be required, but in terms of actual wages and compensation, no. And we're developing a volunteer acknowledgement for volunteers, so that the line between employee and volunteers is right.
I'm thinking like of a circumstance, if, like when they did the outfall inspection, we needed a captain to run the boat out there, and there's an outside company paying for the time of the boat. Would then that be someone we'd be either using our own staff or hiring someone to
It would be a
operate
different
the boat?
process if we were to, retain someone for payment. Our standard procedures would kick in for.
So this
whatever
volunteer
requirements might be
program
for bidding or-
wouldn't
this-
prevent us from doing that?
No, it wouldn't prevent us from doing that, certainly.
Yeah, generally, that, if we're, for like something like that, that wouldn't necessarily be a volunteer type of arrangement.
Yeah.
That would be, we would contract with somebody. And it could be that we contract with somebody that's currently a volunteer
Mhm.
to do those services. Just like when we do the outfall inspection, they were out, we were out there for 8 hours. I mean, it was 8 hours plus, and, for a couple of.
Thank you for your volunteer time.
It wasn't a volunteer. And so, just like today, as an example, we had to go, because we had a ship going in, and so then they took the Port Authority boat out to go do, Corey went out, Corey was in charge. Tim Petrucia drove, the bar pilot, drove the Port Authority boat out. We took soundings in the middle of the bay in preparation for the ship coming in. These are the kinds of things that we need volunteers to do for us. And the reality is, we've really got the cream of the crop. I mean, this is an amazing group of people that have stepped forward. And we're really fortunate. And the reality is, we need to get over this bureaucratic hump of getting insurance and getting some of these things so that we can really get the training. At this point, I feel like we got the horse basically pulling it back, and the horse wants to go and get some training going, and we need to clear some of these bureaucratic obstacles so that we can get some training going. But at the same time, we have to have good quality rules and enforce those so that everybody is safe. And then lastly, there's really 3 main components to this thing. Number one is the emergency fire. when that happens. Number two is if we need a captain for something that we don't have the skills for, to use our boat to go out. And then the third thing is we need people that are going to help us to train our staff so that internally our staff can gain skills, boating skills and other things, so that we can improve our level of skills that we have within our existing employees. And so my request is, let's get this show on the road and thank these guys for all their service that they're providing us. Is what my
So this is not an action item, no?
No, but the
No,
next
it's
one
just-
is.
Next one
related.
is-
Great report.
So we received the report, since it's not an action item, does it still go to the public? Or-
I would have
Yeah.
asked it.
All right, any comments from the public on this item?
State your name.
Alan Boblot, current Harbor District consultant, and having been somebody that's operated a fire boat for over 11 years, was part of the conception of building it and the designing team who put it together. Probably have more hours than anybody on the bay on that boat, inside and out. I was also trained as a mechanic for the vessel as well. I just wanted to say that I'm very much in favor of this program. And I think we have some outstanding people who are stepping way up to be a part of the program. And I, for one, will be a trainer and will do my best to allocate as much possible time as I can to the team and try to get, I'd like to see captains brought up to speed pretty quickly. I can see 4 people in this room right now are ready to get some real sea time. And I'm ready to move with that. And as soon as we get the okay from the district, and I would like to set a rigorous training schedule and get these guys on board.
You go, Alan.
Yeah, I'd like to also just thank everyone who's stepping up for, the good of the bay and good of our community, to be willing to lend your skills to be a volunteer boat captain. So I think we can move on to item number C, consideration of resolution 2020-01.
I'd like to move adoption of 2020.
Second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any report on this, or?
It's just a resolution required to enable the workman's comp to be.
Kick in.
For the volunteers.
So that we can enable this program. Great. Any discussion from the public on this? All right, bringing it back to the board, we have a motion and a second.
Roll call.
That's a roll call.
Commissioner Ross,
Aye.
President Coleman,
Aye.
guess I was vice chair. Then Commissioner Marks
Yes.
and Commissioner Davis.
Yes.
All right, passes. Administrative and emergency permits.
There's none.
Then adjournment.
Only motion.
Thank you very much.